Hi, everyone. This is Wald Amberstone from the Tarot School, and you're listening to 7 Minutes with Victor Daniels, a very prominent and highly experienced psychologist. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. You'll be talking and presenting at the Reader Studio 2014 Tarot and Psychology Conference, and I do want to thank you for talking with us today. I have a question for you, and I'd be very curious to hear your answer since you have a great deal of experience in this field. You've had a long and distinguished career as a professor of psychology, and you know that area well. You know psychology itself and the issue of being a professor. And both of those things combine to make it interesting that you've come to work with tarot. What role, I would like to know, if any, do you feel that tarot can come to play in the field of psychology, both academic and in terms of practice?
In response to that, it's important to recognize that there are two meanings to the field of psychology and to the academic environment. One meaning is research, that is, theories that guide research in college classroom psychology. A second meaning is whatever occurs in the academic environment and the field of psychology, including training in psychotherapy. I think the answers are distinctly different to those two questions. Also, the answer is likely to differ by country and by regions within a country. For example, there is more interest in the tarot and the connections between tarot and psychology in Mexico than there is in the United States, and more in metropolitan areas than in rural areas. This last year, Kuch and I, my wife and I, presented workshops in tarot and psychology in Mexico and found that in big cities like Puebla and Guadalajara there were considerable interest. We're doing some this coming year, and again we find that in the countryside there is less interest than there is in the metropolitan areas. In the United States, most psychologists, even those interested in personality theory and traditional card readings and interpretations, don't want to learn all the traditional meanings and interpretations. And also, in psychology in this country, there is a more scientific than thou kind of orientation in which the model was borrowed from physics and chemistry, and many psychologists want to be just as scientific as the hard scientists, and even more so. That leads to a distrust of anything that they cannot pin down to a few variables defined with great precision. On the other hand, psychotherapy, I think the possibilities have just begun to open up. My wife and I have distinguished between the traditional divinatory readings in which the client or the querent comes in with a question and chooses cards that are unknown, and then the reader provides answers to them on one hand, and what we call representational readings on the other hand, in which the client has the whole deck of cards available face up in front of them, chooses cards to represent various issues or people in their lives. In the latter case, then we can move into kinds of things that are done in psychotherapy, like projective identification. A person imagines that they are a card and what they feel like as that person in that card. This opens the possibility for expansion on projective tests, like the Rorschach, the thematic apperception test, and so on. It opens the possibility of dialogue between the client identifying with one card and then identifying with a different card and engaging in a conversation between them. This can lead to very deep psychological dynamics coming out, to the person going into deep personal issues very rapidly. Readers are very interested, in general, in having all of those traditional meanings of the cards. Therapists tend to be less so. On the other hand, the therapists are better prepared to deal with the kinds of dynamics that emerge than a reader is. There are places that I would not suggest that a reader go, whereas someone who is a trained counselor or psychotherapist can go. We find that trained therapists and people in training as therapists, those who come to a workshop at a professional conference on psychology and the tarot, are very interested in finding out how to use the cards in that regard. And we've had some very powerful experiences in the course of a few minutes emerging in workshops of that sort. Do you have any follow-up question or response in regard to that?
Actually, there are a lot of things that we could do with that if we had more time, and unfortunately we don't. But I'm delighted that you did as much as you did, because it opens up a conversation that needs to be had, and we will do that at another time. I really want to thank you for being here and giving us that little tip of the iceberg, and we will take that further when we get a chance. And also, of course, we're really looking forward to your presentation at the Reader Studio when time comes, and there you'll be able to give us a great deal more information on this very issue. And, of course, you'll be able to give us an example of the practical work that you can do with this material. I think that probably more and more psychologists have become interested in this area and will probably develop it more as we go along. So again, thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll be talking again fairly soon.
Well, we will do more than provide examples. We will provide actual experiential situations where the participants in the conference can actually try out some of the new and innovative methods that we have developed. We're certainly looking forward to being there and happy to see you, and looking forward to the engagement and the interaction with the people who will be there in New York this coming spring.
Well, thank you, Victor. And thanks, everybody, for listening. Be sure to visit the Reader Studio website in order to learn more about the event. Readers with an S followed by studio, so it's readerstudio.com. So, we will see you all in April.